I have the privilege of introducing a young and dynamic author, Dr. MR Venkatesh, popularly known as MRV. We are publishing as KW Publishers a book entitled Retaining Balance the Eternal Way. We shall be releasing the book towards the end of September. And we have today MRV, as I said, he's known, and you probably have seen him on television debating very fiercely on various issues. And in conversation with him is Mr. Prabhakar, who has been very kind enough to not only go through the book thoroughly, but also to uh, be part to agreeing to participate in this conversation with the author. Uh, MRV, if you would like me to tell you about him, he is one of the leading advocates on economic criminal law and a much sought after legal professional. He is also a student of economics and politics. As a professional, he is an advisor to several corporates and promotes in complex transactions. He is really very multitasking. I've seen that at close quarters. He's written many books, but one of the books that we published with him was Sense and Sex and Sentiments, which was an anti-money laundering, and we did very well with it. And we already have an immense interest in this book that we will be releasing later in the month. And if I talk about Mr. Prabhakar, Mr. Prabhakar is a chartered accountant, and he's been working with the public sector. He's also a senior partner with one of the large accounting firms, and he is also president of the Society of Auditors and many other such groups of associations which have anything to do with audit or accounting. Besides being a serious professional, he is also an enthusiastic about classical music and Tamil theatre. So that is the lighter side of Mr. Prabhakar. Thank you, Mr. Prabhakar, for joining us like this. May I now request you to start the conversation with MRV, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Kalpana ji. Thank you for a very generous introduction. And good afternoon, Dr. MR Venkatesh.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. And it is indeed a great pleasure talking to you on this seemingly difficult proposition which has been mentioned in the invite called Creating a Sustainable Economy. As I've had the pleasure of reading and internalizing your monumental work on this retaining balance the eternal way, I thought I would base our chat only on this book, which would perhaps address the issue of sustainability also. And in a matter of sustaining, which is probably the key word, and I have seen from your book, you have argued for restraining all through. So probably an unwritten tagline of your book is restrain to sustain. That is probably what I thought it should be. And MRV, as I was mentioning to you, it's an awesome book. I really can't fathom as to how it was possible for you to, have such a beautiful thought process with a definite and firm thread seemingly going all through the book. And I do not want to call it as a treatise on economics, as your book questions the very basis of it. I also do not want to call it as a research thesis, just because you have cited about 183 reference materials in your book, consisting of various internet sources, books, research publications, articles, etc. As this goes far beyond the definition of a research thesis, in terms of original and soul-stirring analysis and searching questions asked all over the book in several places. MRV, the first thing I want to ask you is the one thing that strikes me is the fact that you have dedicated this book to the civilizational god Rama. It is easy to discern that you have abundance of Lord Rama's blessings. As you have started the book, in the first chapter itself, you have eulogized monogamy. Monogamy is a trait attributed perhaps among all the gods only to Lord Rama. So you have had a reference of Lord Rama indirectly in the first chapter, but last chapter you have dedicated to Rama Rajya. So there is the book starts with Ram and ends with Ram. But tell me, why have you called him a civilizational god?
Mr. Prabhakar, it is very important to know that traditionally economists believe that their subject or their discipline is a dried as a dust and completely deracinated subject, dealing from anything what you do in your life. Economics is some sort of a chamber in your house, and your house is disconnected or connected only to a limited part to that chamber. But what we do, what we live, what we don't do, what we eat, how do we sleep, becomes an integral part of our lifestyle that has a profound influence on economics. Now, the most important thing about economics is that it is for man, not for animals. Now, when did we, the animal, become man? That is the most important question. That is when the alpha male was tamed. If you look into any species of animal today, you will see that they invariably have an alpha male. A lion or a tiger or whosoever it is searching around, or he is building his pride around with the alpha male. But now, my hypothesis of that, what I build up is civilization began when the alpha male was tamed and he gave up his rights to hunt a pack of females, and he restrained himself and built up a family through monogamy. And that was exemplified by the great epic Ramayana. And once that is why today you may have a pantheon of gods. You have God for every damn thing in our society, in our culture, in our tradition. You have a God to begin your prayers, you have God to end your prayers, you have God that you appropriate in the mornings, in the evenings. You have a range of them, a pantheon of them, and some of us believe it's 33 crores of it, 330 million. But if I have to pick out somebody who has got a great resonance to civilization and through civilization to economics, it is Lord Rama. That is why I begin with monogamy and end with Ramraji.
Well, you have expressed in your book very strong views on polygamy, and you have said that in so many words that your monogamy is the norm and polygamy is an aberration. Can you elaborate this with specific reference to the title of your book called Retaining Balance?
As I said, the natural instinct has been to gravitate towards polygamy. And in fact, the first quote that I have made in chapter 1 is of an actress. And she says that it is unnatural to be monogamous. She doesn't believe, the world doesn't believe that we can be restrained enough to choose a partner and live with him or her lifelong. But that is your right, that is your fundamental right, that you can say that I may choose any number of partners and so on and so forth. But that has got profound impact on economics. That is what economists generally miss. But what is an important point that I have also highlighted is that there are theological sanctions for polygamy, and I respect it. I'm not questioning it. But it is my right to point out the debilitating impact that flows out of polygamy. Like Marxists and liberals have taken a view that they would rather create a society, a very homogeneous society, where there is absolutely no link between a man and a woman through the institution of marriage. And the children would absolutely liberate themselves of their parents. And these are the societies that has been envisioned, even tried, attempted by certain people like Sapsovich in the Russian USSR, erstwhile USSR. So these are issues these are not just mere policies. This may look to be theology, this may look to be policy, this may look to be ideology, but at the same time, all these have got profound impact on economics. That is what I am trying to drive at by connecting all these disjointed points.
Okay, I will come back to the two issues that you talked about. One is the fundamental rights. I think this is something that you have also made a very strong reference with reference to the Constitution, which I will probably take in the later half of the discussion. But I will also talk about, ask about family a little later. But then you talked about marriage as an institution. You have strongly averred that marriage is an institution that regulates, dominates, and controls all other human institutions, but receives scant recognition from economists. This is what is your book says. Here again, the sanctity, the so-called sanctity accorded to this institution, is actually different from religion to religion, culture to culture, country to country. And so, how do you perceive that your lament is universally valid?
Now, see, there is a destination point in all these things. Now, monogamy, as I said, was probably practiced very heavily in the US in the first half of, say, 20th century, which I called as a sweet spot of both culture and economic growth in the American history. And I quoted extensively from Tocqueville and his book on America. And they find that family marriage has sustained American growth up to, say, 1950s and 60s. And there was a Swedish actress, which I quoted in chapter 1, Ingis Bergman. And she has an affair with an Italian director. Any affair with an Italian leads to a problem. That is a different thing. But I will just tell you that actor had a love child outside of wedlock. Believe me or not, the Americans did not give visa to her, stating that, look, the American society will hold this lady as a benchmark and our girls will emulate her, and we do not want children out of wedlock. We want the institution of family to be protected. We do not want illegitimate children in our society. We want legitimate children born out of wedlock. And this is not in some 30,000 years ago, Treta Yuga, Kali Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and all these things. This is 60 years back, America as it was. But what has happened? See, you have a right. Prabhakar, this is the fundamental thing that we all need to understand. You have a right to choose your lifestyle, but you cannot duck the consequences thereof. Now, whether it is an American society or a Middle East society or an Indian society, that breaks down the entire issue or structure of family, may well do it and say that we will like to place individual rights above collective rights. You have every right to do that. But you must also be prepared to face the consequences. Today, the world debt is around $328 trillion. And for $1 trillion of GDP growth at a global level, probably we need to contact somewhere around $7 to $8 trillion of debt. This is a consequence that is staring at us, which I also discussed. So my view is, now whenever dignitaries come, we show them the Taj Mahal, we show them the Fatehpur Sikri and so on and so forth, or even take them to the Red Fort. But my view, sir, is that if Ramayana, and not the spiritual side of it, but the economic side of it, the secular side of it, is being explained to them, and we are able to, we arrogate ourselves to think that we will be the Vishwaguru. But Vishwaguru of what? Of telling the world that if family values are inculcated, and it will have a profound impact on economics, I think we would actually emerge as a Vishwaguru. The world is in search for an economic model. The world is trying various economic models, and I think we have to give them what is basic to Ramrajya. And that is what is, there is a vacuum, and we need to play the role.
Dr. MRV, when you were mentioning about the illegitimate children and the US having strong views about it, I remember a particular this thing in Freakonomics, where it was also mentioned about how US was trying to control the illegitimate children, and finally there was a court case about it. I think you also mentioned about it once, and how the crime rate was linked to the birth of the illegitimate children. That is something which I remembered now. But have you, as you have rightly mentioned about the visitors who should probably be shown more about the Indian culture and Indian ethos, I saw in your book, chapter 4, it starts with a quote from a German Nobel laureate, Mr. Heisenberg, I think, Heisenberg. He had mentioned after the conversations about Indian philosophy, I think he had huge conversations with Indian philosophy with Saint Aurobindo or Rabindranath Tagore in Calcutta. He said some of the ideas of quantum physics that had seemed so crazy suddenly made much more sense. A German Nobel literate speaking so highly about Indian philosophy was something very great. But here I want to ask you, one of the central themes of your book is a family. Family as a balancing factor, which you say has been ignored by almost all the economists so far. In fact, your preface even starts with a dig on this particular issue about, about how you saw a book in the airport and which you, and because it has been mentioned that it has been dedicated to my family, you bought the book and you finally found, before you even reached your destination, you found that the word family was not mentioned anywhere else other than the dedication part of it. So you have also, expressed your indignation that the family as a factor has been ignored by the economists. Now, and in chapter 5, you have mentioned that this family is the building block of the economy. However, as I said about different cultures and different countries and all that, family as understood by Indians is not the same as understood by Western society. So is not the outlook on the concept of economics dependent on geography? That is my question.
Okay. To answer that, as I said, the world was predominantly polygamous for a good number of years, till probably 17th, 18th century, both by theology and by practicality, people believed that we have to move towards a monogamous society because it lowered temperatures of competition, unnecessary competition. Now, let me put it this way. I have held also, though I have not put that as a line, but I personally feel that anything that is natural is divine. And for every baby boy born, there is a baby girl which is born. Now, that is the natural algorithm. Now, you don't try to tinker with it. If tomorrow you have, say, 80 baby girls out of every 100 child being born, being baby girls, and 20 being baby boys, you can then think about or conjure about a particular marriage system of one boy taking 4 girls. That would be natural. But if one boy is born for every girl, and if one boy takes 4 girls, marriage, then you have a problem in the marriage market, because marriage is the most biological, basic biological need for a man and for a woman. Now you tinker with that, you have 3 men, and I have quoted extensive researches by various people, and I have found that when men are of the age of, say, 18 to 30, that is the age when they indulge in maximum criminology. And criminology suggests that the basic way on which you can tackle this, men who are having an extra flow of hormones at that age, to control them is only through marriage. And even terrorists have been controlled. I have even quoted the PLA and Irish terrorists being tamed by marriages. So you have to understand the profound implications of marriage. But show me the word marriage in the constitution of any country of some standing in the last 30-40 years. We have not done that. We ignore the basic requirement of mankind, basic biological need, and we say that, look, we have created a sublime constitution. Yes, the constitution is indeed to be revered, no doubt about it. But it doesn't mean that it is cast in stone and it has to be, there's a full stop about it. It is a dynamic document. We have to improve and improvise.
Good. See, you have stressed repeatedly on the lack of balance in several aspects. Even now, we mentioned about the lack of balance in the society in terms of marriage, marriageability, etc. And lack of balance in several aspects that has deep and profound impact on the understanding of economics. In chapter 4, I have seen that you have expressed a mild surprise and perhaps a slight disappointment that even Lord Krishna appears to have skirted one of the important questions raised by Arjuna. In fact, Arjuna asks, what happens if in this war so many men are going to be dying? What will happen to the widows? Or will not the society go astray? I mean, you have asked that Arjuna asked certain questions like this, but it looks like Lord Krishna seems to have skirted such questions, though he has answered elaborately to many other questions which Arjuna asked. This particular question, I did not find an answer. You did not find an answer, which you have mentioned. But if you do you think that Krishna did not know the answer, or the balancing was not great at that point of time or in his times?
Now, it would be too much on my part to arrogate and answer for Lord Krishna. I will leave it at that. But I would say only one thing, that the questions raised by Arjuna in verses 36 to 45 of chapter 1 have always been gnawing at my vitals for a simple reason that the questions are very profound. And if you start looking at what Krishna answered, now the role of Lord Krishna was not to answer all these questions in specie. He had to look into what you chartered accountants will say, a fair, overall fair view, or fair and holistic view, true and fair view about things. And he had to clear his confusion, and he had to go ahead with certain larger things. But in this, I have also spoken to quite a few experts on Bhagavad Gita, and I asked them that verses 36 to 45 are so profound in context of how a family would be sustained. And we are talking here, discussing about sustaining economy. Now, war would mean that men of the age 18 to 45, 50 would be consumed by the war, a large chunk of it. And then the ladies would find it difficult to have men. So ladies would go astray. So he had so much of thoughts flowing between 36 and 45. Usually, the Arjuna Vishada Yogam has been brushed aside by several Indian philosophers. The Arjuna got petrified, and he didn't want to fight a war with his brothers and sisters and cousins and teachers. So he dropped his arms and ammunitions, and he said, let me renounce war. It is not as simple as it is. Arjuna Vishada Yogam, as all of us have these questions coming about in several parts of our life, and we go about answering it. But it is my duty also to question Lord Krishna, that I am not happy with his answer. That's all I would say. I'm not saying Lord Krishna did not answer. I would say, to my limited understanding of Bhagavad Gita, I have not found answer in that. That's the important. So it is, I am equally critical of constitution, economists, and Lord Krishna. So you can say that I'm not critical, partial towards somebody and impartial towards somebody. I'm equally equidistant from everybody in criticizing that the role of family has not been discussed and debated in greater detail.
Good. So you, as you have rightly yourself mentioned, that you are a universal critic. So you are, you don't spare anybody, including the Lord. But throughout the book, you have highlighted what you have called as a missing middle.
Yes.
Namely, the culture and civilization. Do you mean to say that all the economists have propounded all these days were all incomplete versions of the subject, because they have not talked about civilization? And as you rightly mentioned, yes, of course, from Adam Smith's days to John Maynard Keynes, and even perhaps up to Raghuram Rajan, we have seen several economists propounding several theories, not discussing such important topics at all. And their idea of society was something else that did not have the culture and civilization as important aspects. So you please tell me, do you think that these people's understanding was incomplete?
I would say yes. Unabashedly, I would say yes. There is a missing middle. And that missing middle is, as I said, as I given some examples also. And coming from a state like Tamil Nadu, you and I know for a fact, during the month of, say, corresponding to the Ashada month here in North, people don't go for fishing, or they don't do fishing in certain months. I'm taking a very mundane example. Why don't they do fishing right through the 12 months of the year? There is some scientific and there is some cultural reasons. The cultural reason is that the fishes actually mate during those seasons, and if you start fishing in those period of time, you would be disturbing the ecosystem and you won't have enough fishes for the next harvest. So you don't disturb it. Over a period of time, this culture is elevated. This idea is elevated to some sort of a habit into some sort of a religious or a theological sanction, that you should not enter the sea during these months when the fishes would mate. Now, you can question them and say, I would rather fish during when they are mating, and I would catch them by the tons. You can jolly well do that. Nobody is going to stop it. It's your right. But the question is, if you don't do this, will it be sustainable? That is what I have linked it with globalization. A global player, when he enters a local market, is unable to fashion or fathom the local habits, cultures, and the civilizational dimensions of carrying out a business. That is why forests have been denuded, mineral wealth has been looted by countries, from countries by multinational corporations. That is why economists have not been able to find out a sustainable economic model. That is the fact of it. Today, 20 years back, when probably I entered my practice, everybody was talking about globalization, whether it was with the SATION or ZATION, I wouldn't know. But everybody talked about globalization. Now, today, you would see that nobody talks about it. It has become a dirty word. Economists don't use it. You know, the idea that Francis Fukuyama said, we have arrived at the destination point in democracy and market economics, has been dynamited from within the next 2 decades. And I have quoted Mea Culpa of Francis Fukuyama in 2015 when he says, I made a gross error in overestimating the power of markets. And now we are, and in 1991, USSR collapsed. And 2008 or 2009, markets has collapsed. So what remains is that we need a new sustainable economic model. We have to go de novo to the drawing board, and start building it all over once again.
Dr. MR Venkatesh, you have mentioned about USSR. You had a passing reference on USSR and how the economics have evolved over what is called so-called socialism, subject of socialism and all that. I want to ask you a fundamental question. Jawaharlal Nehru, when he became the prime minister, he modeled the economy on socialistic basis. That's what the Congress has been claiming. I want to ask you, is socialism a political concept or an economic one?
Nobody knows about it. It's mere slogan. So you don't elevate slogans to some political or economic thought. It is just some slogan. And it was a slogan from 1950 onwards till 1976. In 1976, it was smuggled into the constitution by Indira Gandhi. And since then, 29 capital A of the People Representative Act has also got a particular declaration to be taken by political parties that they will owe their allegiance to socialism also. And we had people owing, allegiance to market economics, claiming that they are socialists only and fighting elections. So that's one part of it. But be that as it may, the most important thing is that Ambedkar, in the Constitution Assembly debates in perhaps 1946 or 47, makes an elaborate reference, probably 47, makes an elaborate reference to this particular idea that whether we should be a socialist country or not. And overwhelmingly, the idea prevailing amongst the founding fathers of our Constitution was that we should not impose any economic thought on future generations. We must leave it to people to actually build up their own economic ideas and theories. But what happens is, by 1955, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru takes over the entire Indian thinking establishment, and by that time, the profound influence of USSR and KGB had penetrated our intellectuals so much that we had given to the socialist idea. We were romanticizing with Russia for 20, 30 years. And in fact, the slogan used to be, Prabhakar, probably in your childhood days, that if it rains in Moscow, the umbrellas would come out in Delhi. Now, if that was the overwhelming force, what was the need for the new economic policies brought by Manmohan Singh and Narasimha Rao in 1991? Obviously, socialism didn't work. And today, if you go back to what I'm seeing, what Narendra Modi is practicing, or Manmohan Singh practiced during his 10-year period as Prime Minister, it was socialism redux only. So we do not know what it is, but we believe that the state has to be omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, and we fashion our economic policies accordingly.
So socialism is a slogan, not a concept, according to you.
At least I have not been able to understand it.
But then we actually, as you rightly said, that we were talking about socialism so much all these days, and even incorporated it in the constitution, as you use the word smuggled into the constitution. Probably that was the right word. Not just in the constitution, in the preamble of the constitution, which was very vehemently opposed by legal luminaries, including Mr. Palkiwala those days. But then the fact of the matter is now nobody is talking about socialism now. And as you rightly mentioned, from Manmohan Singh days, we have sort of inherited what is called the market economy. And where do you see the lack of balance here?
See, today you see that 80 crore of Indians have to be fed through the ration shop. If you see Human Development Index, we rank pretty low. If you see the per capita consumption, which Professor Bajaj and MD Srinivas have brought in their brilliant book, Annam Bahukurvit, they trace that our consumption of food grains was as low as 394 grams in the year 1965. And in 2011, I calculated it at around 396 or 397. And the world average is around 600 to 700. Now, 30 years have passed by in the so-called reforms, new economic policies, liberalization, privatization, globalization. We have all these slogans. But tell me, have we delivered on to ourselves? Take education for ourselves. The right to education has been amended. We have got the right to education. It has been brought into the Fundamental Rights Part 3. And we are also happy, supinely indifferent that from now on, all our children up to the age 14 will get the barest minimum education up to the secondary level. But are we sure they are getting? So there is something grossly missing. And Thomas Piketty is right. In fact, many of these economists I have quoted are extremely correct with their diagnosis. The problem is, like all healthcare centers, they are very good in diagnosis, but they don't have a doctor to give the prescription. So when it comes to the prescription, they go to the age-old theory that more taxes, more welfare, much more taxes and much more welfare. It is a spiraling downward that I call. And that is why I call that there is a missing middle. Unless you don't get it sorted out, your economics will not get sorted out.
Dr. Venkatesh, you yourself have led me to another important question that I had planned to ask you. That was under chapter 7 of your book, which starts with a fantastic piece of writing. There was a twisted tale of the ant and the grasshopper that you have written. I think it was one of the best comic pieces of writing in the entire book. The wry comedy reflecting the pathetic state of the diligent ants battling for survival against the scheming grasshoppers is a great imagination by you. It is in this chapter, actually, you mentioned about the taxation. It is in this chapter that you have revealed a shocker that the whole system of taxation in this independent India was decided by just a 3-member committee who labored for not more than 3 weeks, and they submitted their report to the Constituent Assembly, and it became a part of the Constitution. Are you seriously telling me that that was all the importance given to such a major issue of taxation in this country, in the independent country, and that we are all suffering the impact of such a callous act by our so-called founding fathers till now? Can you please elaborate on this?
Yeah, I would say this way, that they did not labor for 3 weeks. They only brought it from the 1935 Act. And for that, they took 3 weeks. You may say that why did they take 3 weeks? It should not have taken more than 3 minutes of cut, copying, paste. Probably at that time they didn't have the computers and the Word, Microsoft Word that goes with it. That's all we debated. Taxes are the umbilical cord that links the citizenry to the state. And it is the most important thing that we need to have debated. But we thought that instead of the British, it is the Indians who have come in. And instead of the British taxation system, we will have the British taxation system, levied by the Indians. So we have not devised an indigenous taxation system. And that is what I have brought down in chapter 7. And I have said taxes have never led to welfare and probably may lead to also. But through taxes, through welfare, no country in the world has ever prospered.
So did you say in the entire chapter 7? Chapter 7 was the topic was about the taxes is not the price that we pay for our civilization. That was a fantastic piece of writing in the whole book. Maybe because I could relate more to the taxes, maybe that I enjoyed more. I'm going to ask you one of the two last questions, and this is a very important question. You did mention about the Constitution. You did mention about what Dr. Ambedkar, and when you mentioned about many of the British legislations have been incorporated in the independent India, they did not labor much. They just cut, copied, paste, or whatever technology that allowed that particular day, instead of cut, copying, paste, maybe they did something else. Now, the Constitution of India, you mentioned about the citizens' rights and unalienable rights. It has been mentioned, even the US Constitution also, the Bill of Rights is having a paramount place of importance. The absence of importance given to citizens' duties is what you have actually highlighted in the book. And poignantly enough, you have quoted Mahatma Gandhi, who has actually quoted that he has learned it from his mother. You have gone on to argue that the Constitution is a heavily borrowed one, and perhaps should even be rewritten, specific to Bharatiya concept, modeling Ramarajya. So this is a very radical suggestion. Do you think it is at all possible? And what prompts you to express such a radical thought? I want a detailed answer, please.
Prabhakar, by using the word radical, you are actually trying to scare the viewers. It is not radical. The first article of the Constitution begins India, that is Bharat. No other country has two names. Okay, it begins with a dual personality, dual name. We are all Indians when we deal with the state, and we are all Bharatiyas when we deal with one another. When I deal with my father, mother, friends, relatives, I am a Bharatiya. I am driven more by my karma, my duty. Now, you go to the road, you can find out the ordinary Indian striving hard, dedicating his life to see that his family is sustained, whether he or she. Now, that is the beauty of this civilization. And they may not understand Bhagavad Gita, they may not understand Upanishad, the various scriptures that we have, Ramayana, Mahabharata. But I think even today, there are people who understand Karmanyavadhikarasya. They would understand it, all its dimensions. And they have internalized it, and this is a society that has internalized it. But when it comes to dealing with the state, we are immediately becoming Indians, and when we become Indians, we talk about our rights, especially part 3. So that is the dichotomy that I find. And this, probably I have traced it in several parts of the book, to the Christian theology of a broken self. In fact, the name of Mahabharata originally was called Jaya, and Jaya means seeking victory over self. And you have to seek victory over yourself. This is the message of Mahabharata. Whereas in Ramayana, in the Christian theology, it is a broken self to be intermediated by Christ. And only Christ the Redeemer can elevate you or redeem you. Now, this idea permeates almost all the Western theologists, whether it is Karl Marx, whether it is Richard Dawkins, whether it is Thomas Hobbes. And Thomas Hobbes in 1657 writes about Leviathan. And he says that man is brutish, man is basically selfish, man doesn't have altruistic qualities. So you require an external state to elevate the man. So what is in Christian theology is adapted in Western political thought. Now we have borrowed that into 1935 Government of India Act. And then we copied it into the Constitution of India. And since we created an omnipotent state to manage an individual, we also gave him a fundamental right so that it gets balanced. But just like an alpha male cannot be managed by an alpha female, you cannot have an omnipotent state and a citizenry which is given an unfettered fundamental rights. Both of these are not workable. That is leading to the imbalance. And that is what I have argued in this, that we need to actually factor in all these experiences and probably balance fundamental rights with fundamental duties in Part 3 of our Constitution. The war is between broken self and the self that we in our traditional Indic philosophy speak about, and what the Christian theology is about, the broken self.
Well, as you rightly mentioned, rights are always, defended by the leftists, and it is the duties that are talked about the rightists. But essentially, as you very rightly mentioned, there is a dichotomy here. We have given more importance to the rights, and we have given no importance to the to the duties, because I think duties do not even form part of the apparative part of the Constitution. Maybe they are hidden in the directive principles.
51A, and it is only in passing.
Passing, that's what I think.
Not justiciable.
Dr. Venkatesh, it has been a great pleasure discussing with you the book, and I want you to tell me about something about your book. Who has written the foreword for your book?
Well, it has been authored by my very good friend Arnab Goswami, who I should thank because he had his own physical limitations during the month of May, June, and he did promise and he did deliver. I should thank him. Again, I should thank my publisher, Kalpna ji, her team, who have been bearing with all my complete idiosyncrasies, and I have been torturing them with so many things. Suddenly I will change the cover, suddenly I will change this, I will change that, but they have been putting up with me. I should thank them for that also.
Thank you very much. We will walk this path together.
Yeah, thank you.
And, I'm sure we'll make it a success. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but this is a conversation which was really warming up just now. And but we have to log out now, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Prabhakar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kalpana ji.
Thank you.